Good morning, juniors. Time for American history again. We are going to look today at 1968, a pivotal year in American history, believe it or not. Um, Yesterday, we talked about the counterculture, the hippie movement, all of the problems brought on by the war in Vietnam. We talked about how difficult the war was to win on Monday. Yeah, Monday. So let's look at where we are now. We're in 1968. Um, Eugene McCarthy is a Democratic senator from Minnesota. He's going to challenge Johnson for the election. There's an election in 1968. It's election year for president. Lyndon Johnson's president. All right, Robert Kennedy also enters the race. Now, Eugene McCarthy is an anti-war senator. Okay, he's wanting to really end the war in Vietnam. So he enters the race, and then comes the Tet Offensive in January of 1968. And after that Tet Offensive, when everybody kind of turned against the war at that point, Robert Kennedy, who is the younger brother of the dead president Kennedy, decides he's going to enter the race too, because the Vietnam issue is now a big deal because of the Tet Offensive. So Kennedy feels like, he has something to say about this, so he's going to enter the race too. Then President Johnson shocks the entire nation in March of 1968. There had already been a couple of primaries, and Johnson had come close to losing some of those primaries to McCarthy. So in March, he has a press conference in front of the whole country, and he's giving a speech about where we are in Vietnam and how we're, making progress and all this kind of stuff. And he shocks the entire nation by withdrawing from the presidential race. He's getting out. He's not gonna run for re-election. So in his place, now not his plan, Johnson had nothing to do with this. Hubert Humphrey, his vice president, enters the race, really representing Johnson's position, because what else can he do? He's been vice president for him for the last 4+ years. So he's going to enter the race in Johnson's position. So that means we have 3 Democrats running. We have Eugene McCarthy, anti-war, Robert Kennedy, who's not really, I don't think he's anti-war. He's just, thinking he can get this election because he wants to. He's going to run on his dead brother's name a lot. And then Johnson withdraws, so we have Hubert Humphrey enters as the vice president. Now, in most elections, Hubert Humphrey would have the upper hand. And in this election, that's going to prove to be the case. He's got name recognition because he's been vice president. But remember, Johnson's not really all that popular right now. So that's going to kind of work against him as well. So the problem is, and we'll get to the Republican, who's running on the Republican side in just a minute, but 3 people running on for the Democratic side. Then we've got 2 tragedies that are going to happen back to back in April. And I think both of them happened in April. I'm not sure about the second one. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in April. He's shot by a sniper. He's in Memphis for what was he in Memphis for? I can't remember. I'm just drawing a blank. Oh, it was a bus strike, a garbage worker strike. So he'd gone to Memphis for this garbage strike, and he was shot by a sniper, killed. And of course, this is going to make a wave of violence across the country in all kinds of different places. And then you have Robert Kennedy, the guy running for president. John Kennedy's younger brother is shot by an Arab terrorist type person after he wins the California primary. Now, he wins California. That's a major, major state as far as number of delegates go. So he probably would have been the Democratic nominee had he lived. But he is shot the very night that he wins that primary. So then on the Republican side, we have Richard Nixon, who's going to be the front runner. Nixon had run for president previously. He'd been unsuccessful. He had served in the House of Representatives, I believe it is. Maybe as a senator as well. He was a conservative, but not really. He's more of your book describes him as middle of the road. Conservative in some things, liberal in some things. He was not a Reagan Republican, okay? And we'll get to that in a minute. His challengers right now are Nelson Rockefeller, who is a liberal Republican. He's, in fact, sometimes in the next 30 years, Republicans who don't really act like Republicans are called Rockefeller Republicans. Nelson Rockefeller is a liberal Republican. And then he's also running against Ronald Reagan. Bet you didn't know Ronald Reagan lost this election, but he did. Okay. But Nixon runs on this idea of law and order. We're going to get this war taken care of. We're going to put down all the violence that's going on, and we're going to make things, we're going to make all things better here. Okay. So the Democrats arrive at their convention in Chicago, and they are actually having riots outside of the convention center. I kind of expect that this might also happen this year when we have the Republican and Democratic candidacies, the conventions in the summer. I think it will be interesting to see. Not that I hope that there's rioting outside, but I'm suspecting there might be because people are just so discontent with the way things are going right now. Anyway, in 1968, there were riots outside of the convention. Humphrey wins the nomination, but the police are trying to put down these radical demonstrators that are demonstrating outside of the convention hall. Most of it has to do with Johnson's Vietnam policy, which Humphrey, he can't help it. He's got to stand with it because he's been vice president all this time. So, but read it in your book. It's just hysterical, the things that they called each other, and it's just bad. All right, so we have another factor, though, to deal with, and that is the Wallace factor. George Wallace is the governor of Alabama. He's an idiot. Okay, I'm going to tell you my opinion. I moved to Alabama when he was still governor of Alabama, which was not in 1968. I'm not that old. I wasn't alive then. But he served 4 terms as governor of Alabama, and then he got his wife to run, and she served 2 terms, but she was really like a puppet governor for him. It was terrible. He was a horrible person, okay? Just a horrible person. But he creates what he calls the American Independence Party, and he's very conservative. He would be a Republican, but he is very pro-segregation. He's racist. He's just a horrible racist person. So while he's conservative, your book describes him as pugnacious. You know what that word means? He's picking a fight. Okay? He's always picking a fight. He's brutal. He's not a very good politician. He's not polished and telling everybody what they want to hear. Okay? He's not like that at all. And his real hope was, he didn't think he could win the election, but he was hoping to throw the election into the House of Representatives so that they would have to vote and decide who was going to be the next president. He was hoping to send a message to Washington that there were conservatives in the world and that they needed to be recognized, that they couldn't afford to ignore them anymore. So this is how the election turns out. Notice all the red. That's what Richard Nixon's going to take. And it looks like a lot, but I'm going to give you the results in just a minute. Notice also, this is Wallace, this green area down here in the South. He takes his home state of Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana. He takes one out of North Carolina. He is very conservative, which, remember, the South has been strong Democrat, which is not conservative. So you can see here that the South is beginning to turn Republican, which today it is usually very strongly Republican. Texas, however, goes Democrat. Yeah, in 1968. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the results of the race. Nixon has a slight lead in the popular vote, and I mean very slight. It was 43.4% for Nixon, 42.7% for Humphrey, a difference of 0.7%. But he obviously ended up with a comfortable lead in the electoral vote. Wallace wins 13% of the popular vote, 46 electoral votes. But either way, the election is Nixon's. All right, so that is it for today. I hope you are studying and keeping up with your notes and your class stuff. And let me know how things are going and if you need any help. I need to give you a fast fact for the day. Here it is. Ready? Butterflies taste with their feet. Okay? Butterflies taste with their feet.